I was recently asked, if you don't believe in rankings and championships, why compete at all? Why be in the martial arts at all? And my general answer is, well, within the realm of combat sports specifically, we're training a skill set, and that skill set has an intended purpose. And unfortunately, that intended purpose is, to quote Rory Miller, the creation of cripples and corpses. And that's generally not legal to pursue out in the real world unless you are in a very specific violence professional type of job. And even then, when you're in those types of jobs, you have several orders of operations to go through before you get to actually creating cripples and corpses. There's a lot of de-escalation, there's a lot of apprehension, there's a lot of doing the minimum amount of force necessary to take care of and resolve a threat before you get to the point where you unleash the violence. And so that being the case, right, violence being essentially illegal and otherwise very heavily regulated and sanctioned, then where we can get sanctioned violence to kind of scratch those primal urges to get that competition reflex out ends up being in sport for the majority of the civilian world. And yes, while sport has certain limitations that are not present in the real world, because it's legal, you're not going to face a trial. You're not going to face jail time for competing where you might actually in a street scenario. So it's just about the only legal venue that we have to actually test out that skill set that we have. And while you can never truly verify that everything you have works, because we've talked about this before, saying what works and what doesn't requires a definition of context and criteria for that context. So without criteria, you don't know, and then what works against one opponent doesn't work on the next, because every engagement is fairly singular. But that being the case, right, when you start learning from repeated successes, you start feeling more confident in those skills. Now, there's a whole host of secondary benefits to martial arts training, like, getting in better shape if you're at a school that actually engages in conditioning. You're talking about just being psychologically more confident because you feel like you can take care of yourself, better pain tolerance and problem-solving skills. Like there's a lot of good secondary benefits that go along with the martial arts. But the primary occupation of martial arts is to fight. And you want to be able to test that in as close to a scenario as is legally available to you, and preferably one in which you are reasonably sure that you're not going to walk away from dead or maimed. There's always that possibility. People do die in combat sports. People do end up with debilitating lifelong injuries from combat sports. It does happen, but it's actually pretty rare. And so it's the safest, most legal bet that we have to actually create validation of our skills. Now keep in mind, validation is not the same thing as confirmation. Validation is basically just saying that I can achieve some modicum of success with this thing. You're not actually confirming that this is the path. You're not actually saying this is the way, this is the thing, this works objectively, trademark, right? What you're actually doing is you're validating that you're on the right path and going, oh, okay, I'm doing this, and every time I do this, I get some variation of success. Sometimes I get success with a little bit of, consequential recourse. Sometimes I get very clean success, whatever. But you start developing, you start tightening those margins and kind of validating what's working for you and what's not. And of course, there's always wrenches that get thrown in, right? Because you start getting used to the tricks, techniques, conventions, and assumptions of one set of people or a single person, whatever, and then you move on to the next, and they're operating under a completely different set of assumptions and whatnot. And then all of a sudden you have to go back to the drawing board and reset your game. that sucks, but the fact is that that's why you kind of just don't stop, competing or doing competition-like activities like in-house sparring that you should absolutely be doing frequently. You don't stop doing those things until you can no longer justify the cost versus the benefit that you're getting out of it, because you need to constantly be going back to the drawing board and starting to try to find, do I have a clear picture of success, and do I understand the margins within which that success is possible? Now, there's a couple other reasons that we might actually be looking at why you should be competing in the first place. Now, number one, right, in my book, it's chasing failure. It's not actually chasing success, right? If you are, a lifer, if you're in the martial arts for learning the skill, then you will actually be chasing failure, because the failure is where you have the opportunity to learn the most. It's where you have an opportunity to gain a clearer definition of the margins of what you're chasing after. It is incredibly important to understand the margins, not just have the clear sight picture of the goal, but understand the variability in which the success can still happen, and the margins that shove you outside of that green zone for success. So chasing failure is actually more important than chasing success. If chasing success is the thing that's important to you, that's like chasing a trophy or chasing a belt. All you're doing is looking for a reward rather than enjoying the journey, right? Chasing failure is about the journey. And that's really where this learning and growth comes in, right? Again, we're talking about finding those margins, finding the margins for failure, and getting that clearer sight picture where you kind of know, hey, within X degrees of variation, I can still make this work. That's learning and growth, right? And as we've talked about before, entropy is the enemy of life. Entropy is the enemy of reality. If you stop growing, you die. Simple as that, right? All of nature wants to basically be at zero energy, right? Entropy is essentially nature trying, it's not about chaos. I hate that phrase. Entropy is about everything being at an equal state of energy where nothing has more energy than the next thing, which means that everything is at essentially equilibrium. And if everything is at equilibrium, that means there's no heat, there's no light, there's no life, right? So you stop growing, you stop learning, you stop struggling, you stop moving, you die. And so competing, chasing growth, chasing learning helps you stay on top of that. I mean, it all comes for us, right? Not one of us gets out of here alive, but the fact is that we can enjoy our time here a hell of a lot more if we continue pursuing things that help us grow and help us become more and help us continue to struggle against the entropy. The other side of it, right? How many stories have you seen, right? This is a really common trope in a lot of storytelling. You get the undefeated warrior that's just looking for somebody who will take him out. Why would that be, right? Like, what insane human being would ever be like, I want somebody to defeat me? You know what that is, right? And we talked about this when we talk about learning theory, is when things are the same for too long, there's a dulling effect. You kind of, you tune out, you get dull, you basically, all the things run together, right? The reason that time feels like it flies as you get older is the fact that the more routine your life becomes, the more the days run together, and your memory doesn't latch onto things that don't have some kind of contrast or novelty. Well, somebody who is completely undefeated and just goes in and it's too easy and it's too easy and it's too easy, they're not being challenged anymore. They're being denied this learning and growth, right? So they get bored and they need that action, and they might just feel like they're an adrenaline junkie. They may not be looking to cognitively learn anything, but their body is still going, no, we need to stay alive. We need to still be the thing. We still need to be alive. So we're gonna keep chasing this action because this action is what I need to feel alive. And if I meet the person that can take me out, well, then I succeeded, right? Their success is their failure. Right, and again, it goes back to that chasing failure thing, right? This is a major part of like human psychology, to the point where it becomes a massive part of storytelling. I'm not saying success is not important. Success is important, right? Success gives us the clear sight picture of how we get to the goal. That is very important. but we need to know the margins so that we're not zigzagging all over the place and getting off into the weeds and losing track. We really don't want to be taking a 1 step forward, 7 steps back type approach, right? So it's not just the validation, which is a very important part, right? But it's this staving off of entropy that is really, really important. And right, it keeps us active, it keeps us alive and learning and growing, and it helps us develop that skill set and feel a sense of validation for like, hey, I was learning this, what is this good for? Oh, because it's good because I can problem solve and I understand how these pieces fit together, and it's like a game of chess or something like that, but it's much more open-ended, right? There's not as much limitation on the number of moves that you can make. And it becomes just a very, very fascinating mental puzzle that is extremely healthy for us to continue to pursue. And again, at just still having kind of, caveman DNA running around in us, we still have those competitive drives, even if they're not expressly necessary in the modern world. So it allows us to scratch that itch and not let that spill over into polite society where that may actually be more detrimental than beneficial. So don't be afraid to chase failure. Like, even if you don't believe in organized competition and ranking and championships and things like that, you still need to practice whatever your studies are within some reasonable facsimile of the context they were designed for. Otherwise, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. All right, that's enough rambling for me. I'm going to get out of here. I'll talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, give the dog a bone. You can follow us on our other social media accounts. And if you really like us, you can head over to Amazon and buy a shirt. You can also go over to Gumroad and purchase some of our instructional courses. All of the links will be provided and also on our website. If you happen to be in the Phoenix area, we would love to meet you. Come drop in for a class, even just to chat. And if you're looking for a new home, we would be happy to have you. So until next time, good journey.